January 9, 2003. A regular Thursday morning in Miami Beach. Maurice Gibb wakes up in his waterfront home, not knowing this day will change music history forever. By evening, one of the most famous harmony singers in the world would collapse in his kitchen. 3 days later, he'd be gone. And with him, the Bee Gees, a band that ruled the world for 4 decades, would die too. You know their voices: Stayin' Alive, How Deep Is Your Love, Night Fever, 3 brothers from a tiny island who became the kings of disco. But Maurice wasn't just the quiet one in the middle. He was the glue that held it all together. The bass player, the keyboard master, the arranger who made their harmonies perfect. This is the story of how one medical emergency ended 40 years of brotherhood. How the loss of the forgotten Bee Gee silenced one of music's greatest groups forever. It's a story about family, fame, and how quickly everything can change. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story, make sure to subscribe to Retrowaves for more untold music stories that shape the soundtrack of our lives. The Gibb story starts on the Isle of Man, a small island between England and Ireland. Hugh and Barbara Gibb had 5 children, but 3 of them had something special in their voices. Barry was born in 1946. Then came the twins, Robin and Maurice, in December 1949, just minutes apart. Hugh Gibb was a drummer and bandleader, but work was hard to find. The family lived in a small house with no indoor bathroom. Money was always tight. But when the boys started singing together as kids, people stopped and listened. In 1958, when Barry was 12 and the twins were 9, the family made a huge gamble. They packed everything and moved to Australia, hoping for a better life. Hugh had heard there were more opportunities there for musicians. They settled in Brisbane, then later moved to Sydney. The boys started performing anywhere they could: church halls, school shows, local talent contests. They called themselves the Bee Gees, short for Brothers Gibb. Maurice was the shy one, but he had perfect pitch. He could hear when something was wrong in their harmony and fix it instantly. They lived in cheap apartments, sometimes sleeping 3 to a bed. Barry worked during the day and practiced with his brothers at night. Maurice learned to play bass guitar because they couldn't afford to hire a bass player. Money was so tight that they shared one guitar between the 3 of them. Record companies kept saying no, too young, not commercial enough, who wants to hear kids singing? But the boys kept going. Hugh drove them to every audition, sometimes selling household items to pay for gas. Maurice never complained, even when they had to wear the same stage clothes week after week, even when other kids at school made fun of them for being different. He just focused on making their sound better, learning new instruments, writing down chord changes in a notebook he carried everywhere. Everything changed in 1966. The boys were performing at a small club in Sydney when a local DJ named Bill Gates heard them. Not the computer guy. This was Bill Gates from radio station 2SM. He was blown away by their harmonies and helped them get a meeting with Festival Records. Their first single, Spicks and Specks, hit #1 in Australia. Suddenly, the Gibb brothers were stars, but they dreamed bigger. They wanted to conquer England, America, the whole world. In 1967, they moved back to England with just a few dollars in their pockets. They signed with Robert Stigwood, a manager who believed in their talent. Stigwood got them a deal with Polydor Records. Then came To Love Somebody. Maurice's bass line drove the whole song. His harmony on the chorus made Barry's lead vocal soar. The song climbed the charts in England and America. Radio stations couldn't stop playing it. But Maurice wasn't satisfied with just playing bass. He taught himself keyboards, learned how to work the recording studio mixing board, studied how different instruments could blend together. While Barry wrote most of the melodies and Robin focused on his distinctive vibrato, Maurice became their secret weapon in the studio. Massachusetts hit #1 in England. I've Gotta Get a Message to You followed. By 1968, the Bee Gees were selling millions of records. Maurice was only 19, but he was already being called one of the best bass players in pop music. The quiet twin had found his voice, not just in singing, but in creating the musical foundation that made the Bee Gees sound like no one else. 1977 changed everything. The Bee Gees had been successful, but Saturday Night Fever made them legends. Maurice's keyboards opened Stayin' Alive. His bass line made people dance. His harmony vocals turned good songs into classics. The soundtrack sold over 40 million copies worldwide. That's not counting all the illegal copies. Every radio station played Bee Gees songs back to back. Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, How Deep Is Your Love, More Than a Woman. Morris's fingerprints were all over every track, but he stayed in the background. Interviews focused on Barry's songwriting and Robin's high notes. Maurice just smiled and talked about the music. He was the one who figured out how to layer their voices in the studio. He was the one who suggested the bass lines that made people move. Concert venues sold out in minutes. The Bee Gees played to screaming crowds of 50,000 people. Maurice would stand stage left, playing his bass, singing harmony, occasionally stepping up to the keyboards. Fans held up signs with his name, but he seemed surprised by the attention. At home, Maurice was building a recording studio. He wanted to produce other artists, work on side projects, but the Bee Gees kept getting bigger. They won Grammy Awards. They got a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. They were the soundtrack to the late 1970s. Maurice's wife Lulu, the Scottish singer, said later that he never fully understood how famous he was. He'd go to the grocery store and be shocked when fans asked for autographs. Barry and Robin seemed more comfortable with fame. Maurice just wanted to make music. By 1979, the Bee Gees had sold over 100 million records. They were one of the best-selling groups of all time. Maurice was rich, famous, and married to a pop star, but something was starting to go wrong. The disco backlash hit like a truck. By 1980, Disco Sucks became a rallying cry. Radio stations stopped playing Bee Gees songs. Young rock fans saw disco as fake, commercial music for people who didn't understand real rock and roll. The brothers took it personally. Maurice started drinking heavily. He'd always been the quiet one, but now he became even more withdrawn. Barry and Robin argued about the band's direction. Should they keep making dance music or go back to their rock roots? Maurice found his answer in alcohol. Wine with dinner became wine with lunch, then wine with breakfast. His bass playing stayed sharp, but friends noticed he was different, sadder, more isolated. The band had money problems too. Bad investments, expensive divorces, tax issues. Maurice's marriage to Lulu fell apart in 1982. The stress of fame, the drinking, the constant touring, it was too much. In 1969, Robin had briefly quit the band. Now in the early 1980s, all three brothers were thinking about going their separate ways. Maurice talked about becoming a full-time producer. He worked with other artists, but his heart wasn't in it. The drinking got worse through the 1980s. Maurice would show up to recording sessions drunk. He'd forget lyrics during concerts. Barry and Robin tried interventions, but Maurice would just disappear for days. His second marriage, to Yvonne Spenceley, in 1975, was rocky because of the alcohol. Yvonne later said she spent years worrying that Maurice wouldn't come home, or worse, that he'd come home too drunk to remember who she was. The music industry had moved on. New wave, hip-hop, grunge, the Bee Gees sound seemed old-fashioned. Maurice watched younger musicians become stars while his own band struggled to get radio play, but the Gibb brothers were survivors. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, they found new life writing songs for other artists. Maurice co-wrote Heartbreaker for Dionne Warwick. He worked on tracks for Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand, and Dolly Parton. This was Maurice's element. In the studio, away from the spotlight, he could focus on pure music. His arrangements made other singers sound better. His bass lines gave their songs backbone. Producers started requesting him specifically. Then something unexpected happened. Maurice got sober. In the late 1990s, with help from Yvonne and his children, he stopped drinking. Friends said it was like getting the old Maurice back. He smiled more. He played with more energy. He seemed excited about music again. The Bee Gees released One in 1989, their first album in 6 years. It wasn't a huge commercial success, but critics praised Maurice's production work. His keyboards were more sophisticated. His bass playing was more subtle and complex. Maurice also surprised people by becoming a family man. He and Yvonne had 2 children, Adam and Samantha. Maurice, who had always been uncomfortable with fame, loved being a dad. He taught his kids to play instruments. He wrote little songs for them. By the late 1990s, the Bee Gees were having a quiet comeback. Their old songs were being sampled by hip-hop artists. Movie soundtracks featured their hits. Young people who had grown up hearing Stayin' Alive in movies were discovering the rest of their catalog. Maurice was happy, sober, healthy, making music with his brothers again. He built a home studio where the 3 of them would work on new songs. It felt like the early days, but better. They were older, wiser, more appreciative of what they had. No one knew that time was running out. January 9, 2003, started like any other day. Maurice woke up in his Miami Beach home. He had breakfast with Yvonne. He was planning to work in his studio that afternoon. The Bee Gees were talking about a new album, maybe a tour. Around lunchtime, Maurice complained of stomach pain. Yvonne thought it might be something he ate, but the pain got worse. By evening, Maurice was doubled over. He couldn't stand up straight. Yvonne called an ambulance. Maurice collapsed in their kitchen while waiting for paramedics. He was conscious, but in terrible pain. The ambulance rushed him to Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami Beach. Doctors quickly diagnosed the problem. Maurice had a twisted intestine called intestinal volvulus. It's a serious condition, but usually treatable with surgery. The doctors told Yvonne that Maurice would be fine. They'd operate in the morning, but Maurice's condition got worse overnight. His intestine had been twisted for too long. Toxins were spreading through his body. On January 11th, surgeons performed emergency surgery to remove the damaged section of intestine. The surgery seemed successful. Maurice woke up and talked to Yvonne. He joked with the nurses. He asked when he could go home, but early on January 12th, Maurice went into cardiac arrest. His heart stopped. Doctors tried everything. CPR, electric shock, emergency drugs. Nothing worked. At 1:30 a.m. on January 12, 2003, Maurice Ernest Gibb was pronounced dead. He was 53 years old. Barry rushed to Miami from his home in England. Robin flew in from London. They held a private funeral service. Yvonne was devastated. The children couldn't understand why their father was gone so suddenly. Celine Dion, who had worked with Maurice on several songs, said he was one of the most talented and kindest people in music. Elton John called him a musical genius who never got the credit he deserved. With Maurice gone, the Bee Gees were finished. Barry and Robin tried to imagine continuing, but it was impossible. The three-part harmony that defined their sound for 4 decades couldn't exist with only 2 voices. The music was always about the 3 of us together, Barry said at Maurice's memorial service. Without Mo, there are no Bee Gees. Music historians started recognizing what they had missed while Maurice was alive. He wasn't just the bass player or the keyboard player. He was the arranger who made their harmonies work. He was the producer who shaped their sound in the studio. Listen to Stayin Alive again. Maurice's bass line is what makes you want to dance. His harmony vocal on the chorus is what gives the song its power. He played keyboards, bass, guitar, and sang background vocals, sometimes all on the same song. Other musicians came forward with stories about Maurice. Paul McCartney said Maurice helped him understand how to layer bass lines. Nile Rodgers from Chic said Maurice taught him studio tricks that he still uses today. The Bee Gees were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997, but Maurice's individual contributions are still being discovered. Musicologists studying their recordings find his fingerprints everywhere. Keyboard parts that seemed simple but were actually complex. Bass lines that seemed obvious but were actually genius. Their songs never stopped playing on the radio. Stayin Alive became a cultural touchstone, used in movies, commercials, workout playlists. Every time someone hears that opening keyboard riff, they're hearing Maurice Gibb's legacy. Maurice Gibb spent his life in the shadow of his more famous brothers. Barry got credit for writing the songs. Robin got attention for his distinctive voice. Maurice just played his bass, sang his harmonies, and made the music work. But here's the truth, without Maurice, there would have been no Bee Gees. He was the foundation. Everything else was built on. The quiet twin who held it all together. On January 9, 2003, Maurice woke up not knowing it was his last normal day. By evening, he had collapsed. 3 days later, he was gone, and with him died one of the greatest groups in music history. It makes you think about the people in your life who work behind the scenes, the ones who don't demand attention but make everything possible, the ones who support, who strengthen, who quietly keep things running. Maurice Gibb was 53 when he died. Barry is still alive, still making music. Robin passed away in 2012. But when you hear those harmonies, when you feel that bass line, when you can't help but move to Stayin Alive, that's all 3 brothers together. Some stories end with triumph, others end with tragedy. Maurice's story ends with this question: how much talent can the world lose in just 3 days? And how many other quiet geniuses are we missing while they're still here? The Bee Gees are forever. But forever ended the day Maurice Gibb collapsed in his kitchen, and the music world lost a brother, a father, and a foundation that could never be replaced.